Joining me is Michele Levine. She's the CEO of Roy Morgan Research. Michele, great to see you. Look, first of all, honestly, I can't read at all the size of this supposed swing. People are all over the shop. It's huge, it's massive, it's nothing. I don't know. I trust nothing anymore. What are you picking up?
Well, it's a pretty loud swing, we can say that. But look, arithmetically, it's pretty simple. This is about a 2 percentage point swing, 2 to 2.5 percentage points since the last election, if we look at it on a two-party preferred basis. So the Labor Party won at the last election with 57 to 43% on a two-party preferred basis. And at the moment, our latest poll, which was conducted just yesterday, had the Labor Party on 55 to 45 on a two-party preferred vote. So it's that much swing. I guess the really interesting thing is, between about August and October, it looked as if the Labor Party was sitting on something like 60 or a little bit more than 60 to 40. So if we look at the movement from then, it's about a 5 to 5.5 point swing. And of course, as you were saying, probably not enough to get them across the line. And there's many elections where we look and say, gee, if the swing kept going for another 3 weeks, the other party would have got in. But the answer is it doesn't. They don't have an extra 3 weeks to capture that swing and let it go to its full degree.
Look, that's really interesting because I did notice, like you were saying in August, it was weird that the government was so far ahead. And really, it's in these last few weeks that the air has gone out of that balloon. But also in your August polls, I thought you were picking up the issues that I think, you tell me if I'm wrong, the issues that are suddenly coming home to roost for Labor. Not enough to cost them the government, but it could be very painful. You had people telling you back in August, look, we're going to back Daniel Andrews, but look, we think he lacks integrity, he was dishonest, he lied, he was arrogant, he was dictatorial, and by the way, he spent too much. That criticism was coming through then, but didn't affect Labor's vote at all. It is coming through now and is affecting the vote. What's switched?
I think a couple of things have switched. Let me come back and say, although this swing we talk about on a two-party preferred basis is easy to understand, this election's not a two-horse race. This is not a two-party preferred election. And there'll be many seats that will be really different. And we have about 30% of the electorate are not voting for either Labor or the LNP. So that other vote, that rejection of the major parties is really, really high. And that makes it extremely tricky. So coming back to your question about sort of August, when we were already seeing frustration with the government, you have to say in August, support for the government was at its high, a really, really high situation, which is kind of unusual. Usually Australians and Victorians kind of knock the government they've got in power, complain about it, then come back closer during the election. Daniel Andrews and the Labor government managed to hold on to support for a really long time. There was a very strong distrust, negative response to Daniel Andrews, and probably Daniel Andrews more than the Labor government, but it was really coming from people who would not typically have voted for the Labor Party anyway. There was a small but really deeply felt annoyance about the pandemic handling, about the economic impact of that, but a large number of people, a whole lot more people in fact, were very supportive of the way that Daniel Andrews handled the pandemic. And many people said, he made the tough decisions, even though they may not necessarily have agreed with him, that he did what had to be done and stood by things. So I think what we were seeing at that point was a really strong a very vehement, vitriolic anti-Daniel Andrews sentiment from people who were very unlikely to vote Labor anyway. What we've seen since then is a number of things. At that point also, there was really no viable alternative. So it was like Daniel Andrews or what? So we have to remember that the Liberal Party
that's
didn't
the
really
election
have its act
campaign,
together
isn't
in
it?
any
Suddenly
shape or form.
there's some guy saying, look at me, look
That's
at me,
right.
look at me. But, the thing
Exactly.
with the Liberal leader
there's a
is
little
I
bit of
just
that.
wish you'd had more gravitas.
Or a little bit more time to actually demonstrate what what needed to be said. So I think what happened, we have to remember contextually, there's a couple of things going on. Even in the small period of this election campaign, we've seen the economy getting worse and worse. We're seeing consumer confidence tanking, like really low levels of consumer confidence. We're seeing inflation expectations and inflation. We're actually seeing interest rates going up. We're seeing mortgage stress going up, and the spectre of a recession is with us. So even though these things we tend to think of as national issues, I mean, we are all Australians and we're all Victorians. These things typically play out very badly for the government in office. And even though perhaps Daniel Andrews isn't to blame and the Labor Party in Victoria didn't cause all of these things, or they did, that's how people feel. So that's going to put pressure onto the government. The second incredibly important thing is that Australians at the moment, and have increasingly over time, been incredibly distrusting of government, government instrumentalities, political parties, all of the things that have to do with authority. We are just a very distrustful
Michele,
environment.
I agree with you. I agree with you to a point, and there's a lot of reason to distrust government, except in Victoria, I think, unfortunately, people have not been questioning enough of this government. As you said, there was a lot of support for Daniel Andrews, tough leadership during the pandemic. What people didn't question is, was it actually too tough and useless? I mean, banning children from playgrounds, it's utterly useless. I think it was a beneficiary of a lot of people not wanting to question what he did. And maybe once you've got one reason to question him, you've got suddenly a lot. So we shall see.
Andrew, I think
Michele Levine,
the majority
so
of people actually...
I've got a dash, but thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. And very brave of you to put a prediction as a pollster when voting day is only a couple of days away. We shall come back to you with a garland if it turns out you're right. Thank you so much for your time.